Want to master your first woodworking joint? I'm going to show you how to do a half lap joint, and we're only going to use a saw. So minimal tools for this one. It's our first woodworking joint, a proper joint, not a butt joint screwed together. This would be a proper joint if you glue it. So we've got 2 pieces of timber, we've got pencil, sharpener, combination marking gauge, and a tenon saw, bench vise. Definitely got a working drawing. So I've done my working drawing and I've started to mark out my timber. I want it to look like this. So we've got top, and I'm going to put my face and edge on it. So that is my face and edge marking. We've got a base, we've got a face and edge marking. That is hugely important because they are our reference points, and that's where we're going to be marking out and working from. It's going to end up looking like this working drawing. The top one is going to go all the way over that piece, and the bottom one will go underneath, like that. When we're doing this one, we're going to leave a small overhang. It's our first joint. We're going to let it overhang a little bit, because when you progress, you're going to be able to follow through and plane that off, but that comes down the line. I'm going to put this top piece over this one with a slight overhang. I'm putting a little mark on it. I'm not drawing a straight line all the way across, just a small mark. Let me do that with a pen, and hopefully that's a little easier to see. Just a mark. This one can go over here, leave 5 to 10 mil on that side, put a small mark. Purposely putting a mark on it and not a straight line. When people are starting out to put a straight line, they think, oh, that's a lovely straight line off the edge of that timber. But it's not a perpendicular line. It's not at 90 degrees. It's not a square. So just a mark. Pop this in your vise. We're going to use the square on our tenon saw. That's here. Put that, my pen on the mark, bring it up to it, mark across, turn my timber. This edge will go against the face side. Let's see where we're going on that one, and run it through there. If I flip that over, I have to turn my square over because I want to hit that side there. It must be on an edge side or a face side. This is on my face. If you've invested already in a combination square or a tri-square, that's what you'd use. But I just wanted to show you that you can do it with minimal tools. Take this edge, let's do this one backwards because I wanted on more of the timber. So that's going to go across here. That's it. Across that edge. But I need to lean over to see it. Can't see it, so I'll do it this way. Put my little mark in there. If you can get a combination square, do so. But if you don't have one, use the saw. We've squared all the way around that one. Nice. We've got our timbers. Let's double check against our working drawing again. It's going to go that way. We've got our combination marking square. Found the center. So you find the center by marking both sides. But what's seriously important all the time is to keep this block against the face side of both timbers. Then if there are any misalignments, it'll be the same distance from that face in all the time. So ultimately it'll end up being correct. Let's run that line down here. Flip you over through here. I put a dot in the end to stop it, so when I push that, it stops in there. Then we're going to drag that down in here. We highlight the line with a pencil. Mark after you've done your marking outline. I went off a little, that's okay. I'm not cutting that one. Through there. At this stage, check your base. What's coming off? Check your waistline. The top of that bit is going to get cut off. So hash that out. That's going to be removed. This is part of your marking out, and it'll help you in all your joints going forward. That's our waist. Lovely. Next one. Here's my face. On the right side, I'm right-handed. Dent there. Run that down into that. It stops. Stops there. Tighten that up. Run it down and run it across. Thank you very much. Combinations marking gauge. we're done with you. It's handy to make use of a vise if you've got one or some sort of clamping equipment on here, especially if you're learning this in college. Instead of trying to mark your timber here, use as many hands as you can. The top, that's going to get cut out. That means the top of this is staying, the bottom here is going to get cut out. Hash that one out. Keep that in my pocket. So there we go. The top stays. I can see that because that solid line going through there. So it should stay like that. And that one goes. If I'm a little confused by it, you could rub out that line. But because I did it in pen, we'll do that. There we go. That'll do fine. Right, the important part. How we cut this down. There's 4 steps to that. We're going to take our 4 steps. I'm putting it in the vise and I'm going to stand this up perpendicular. Being right-handed, I would want to stand there, but then I'd have my back to you, so that won't be great. Well, I'll do it for you. Now, on the waist side of the line, we're going to cut on this waist side. So I want to get as close to that line as I possibly can, but not on the line and not on the good side. It must be on the waist side of the line. And that is not the left or the right or the top or the bottom. It's the waist side, wherever that is. This time it's over there, now it's over there. Must be on the waist side of the line. It does have a name. When I'm cutting it, first I'm going to cut a small line across the top. Get in there. Throw that dust out of the way. You can still see my line across here. That's what we want to see. Now at this stage, I don't want to cut all the way down. So that's step 1. For you this way, put it in the vise at 45. And you'll be able to see down both of these lines. That's ideal because what we're going to do now is take our saw down this line and put a dent in it. That dent that we cut out is called a kerf. K-E-R-F. Kerf. That's a key word. Tilt my timber a bit more. Bring that kerf line down to the bottom of the baseline where you're going to cut. You don't want to go beyond it. So that's my kerf line down here. Turn your timber over. This is step 3. We're going to do our 3rd kerf line. That's through there. When we do the kerf lines like this, that means now step 4, when we step that up, I'll do it so you can see it. When we step that up, I'm going to cut through it. Now I'm going to cut all the way down, but I don't have to keep coming and checking to look on this side to see if I'm straight. I can stand back here and focus on this line and come down here because the blade should now follow my kerf line. It won't follow a pencil line, it'll go wherever it wants. But if there's a kerf line in there, it should follow that kerf line. You can check it a couple of times, but you don't have to check it as often. So this is your step 4, cutting right down. This is a rip cut. The tenon saw will do a rip cut because you're ripping down through the grain. When I get to the bottom of this, I want to keep this level. Then I should be level on that bottom line. But when you get closer, is when you want to check it out. Now, we're nearly there. We don't want to go too far. That's our cutout. At that point, we don't need a bench hook or anything. We can put this in here and cut this down till we get it out. Let's do the other side. Want me to talk you through that again? Let's do that again. I know it's video, you can play rewind, but let me do it again. 4 steps. Step 1, keep it level. Do the top, small kerf on the waist side of the line. That's 1 kerf. Step 2, put it at a 45-degree angle or more in your vise so you can look down both lines. That's your 2nd kerf. Flip it over. 3rd kerf. Going in there. If I was doing this, I'd cut it from here, but you wouldn't be able to see it from there. Maybe, well, we saw that on the last one. Let me cut it this one. Drop it in there. Cut down. Keep that plump and solid. Hands above the blade. Don't hold your timber like this and cut it through it. I've seen it happen before. It doesn't end well. Down to the line. Happy with that. At this stage, done away with the bench hooks. You can put it in your bench vise. Hook that in there. We're going to do a cross cut on the waist side of the line. Base. Hopefully you haven't hashed your timber on both sides and you're not sure which is which. If you need to double check, go to the drawing and check. This is only hashed on one side, that's our waist. Clearly hashed out. Now, at this stage, when this doesn't come out, don't go pushing your timber in here and cutting that way. It flicks out, that's where people cut themselves. Take your time at it, put it upright, cut it down a little bit more. Out it goes. You might have to turn it back, cut it there again. So we're looking at our drawing, so only. Check out the tutorials. I'm going to cut a cross half lap or cross halving joint. It's good practice when you're starting out to do a sketch. So we're going to do it on a piece of paper. Well, I'm going to use the board. And for this, I'm going to actually draw it out in 2 colours. And then I'm going to write on the timbers in 2 colours so that we can identify which goes where and how we're going to relate it back to our working drawing. So cross halving joint, cross half lap. Let's start with the top one. That's going to be slightly easier to do. So the top one's going to be blue. That is going to be this one. It's going to be the top. Let's write that on here. That actually says top. And on your working drawing, it's useful to start marking it out as well. So that's my face, and that's going to be my edge in there. I've got my face and edge on my timber here. I've also got my name on it. And we've got that. So if that's on top, we want the other piece coming across here. And that's going to be the bottom piece. So let's write that on here. Bottom or base. A base. There's our base. And there's our face. An edge in red. Far easier to make mistakes in pencil than it is in construction or building. Now, we want the base piece to come across underneath there. So with that, we're going to draw our block of timber coming through here. That's what we'd see, a solid piece in there. But halfway through here, we would have the red one coming down here. So I'm going to dot that line in here, and I'll dot it on the other side as well. So when you see working drawings, if you see dotted lines, often the dotted lines will be kind of straight across like that. You wouldn't see this bit. It means that that bit's hidden. So our bits are going to be hidden in there. The top one's going to go through, and we're going to we work out then as we're cutting it, where is going to be the waste and what we're keeping. So it is important to have a working drawing. You may be given one, but ideally sketch it out, and it helps you to get your head around it, because that's not always that easy to get your head around the drawing and how the actual things work together. There's our working drawing. We're going to come back to this in a little. Let's leave it on this side. Tools we need. Let's get a resource list. What we're going to write up. Well, we need timber. This timber is softwood, SW, and it's planed all around. So let's write our resource list. SW, and that is softwood. PAR, which is planed all around. And this one is probably 44 by 32. 44 mil by a 32 mil. How long is it? No, it's approximately 300. No, it's about 200. But it's only for practice, so that's fine. I'm not too bothered about the length. As long as it's at least 50 mil either side, so we don't split it out. That's it. What else do we need? We're going to need our pencil. I'll mark stuff up in a pen, but we're going to need a pencil. If we've got a pencil, we need a sharpener and a razor. I know that's basic stuff, but that is what we need. Then we're going to mark it up with we're going to need the combination square. So we're going to use a combination square to mark this up. We'll also need a combination marking gauge. We will need a tenon saw. So we've got our tenon saw and a chisel. I'm going to use a bevel edge chisel, a 38 mil bevel edge chisel. 38 mil will be very nice to cut through that. Terrific. We need a bench. Got a bench. We need a bench vise. Got a bench vise. Great. We're good to go. Let's keep our working drawing here so we can keep watching this and working on our timber here. So on this one, I've marked it up. Top, there's my face. There's my edge. I haven't done my face and edge on this drawing, so I want to put that in on the working drawing. It is important because this is really our reference points, our face and edge side. The face side This is what we want to see, and the edge side is going to be in the inside there. Because when we come to use the other tools, we've got to use these facing edges to reference from them. So, looking at my working drawing, I've got my face sides up, and there are my face sides, and I've got my edges in. That's good. That one's labeled top, that's labeled top as well. This one, I need to label that as the base, so let's write that there, base. Put your name on it as well. Might ask, what's the point putting your name on it? Because if you're working in a workshop with multiple people, you don't want them taking your work. So this one's blue, that is me. Great, so all marked up, labeled. Now, we're going to use the vise, and I'm going to mark it up with the help of the vise. It's easier to secure your timber in there. Take the combination square, I'm going to run it down about halfway. I want a sharp pencil for this. I'm going to go approximately halfway here. I'm going to mark out the base. I'm going to run the body of the combination square against my edge. Here's the reference points. It's got to be against that edge. Can't be up top or on a non-facer edge side. So that's on there. Now I can put my timber up to that. That means that my lines will be square. If I put it on like this, I will get straight lines, but they're not going to be perpendicular and properly square cuts or 90 degrees. So I'll use this, put it on here, mark the outside. When I mark that, I only want a small mark. I don't want to do a straight line. And on this one, a small mark there as well. Then I'm going to square those lines, put my pencil on that, and I can take my rule up to that. Saying square your lines means doing a 90-degree line perpendicular to that edge. Since it's in the vise, I'll leave it there. So you can see from the front that I don't have to move it around that much. And I want this to go just beyond halfway down here. The body of the combination square is on the face side now. That'll be halfway there. Without getting marked. That one through there. I'll do this side on both of those lines. So it's this red one that's going to get cut out on the top. That's marking my waist. This bit's going to be waist. So there's our base. Gets cut out. That's the one that's going to cut. So it's important to keep referring to your working drawing. I'll keep saying that because when you're starting out, this is, well, a good way of constantly checking against your drawing. Now, for the top piece, we're going to cut out the bottom. So I'm going to turn that one over. I've got my edge towards me. Let's get that tight in the vise. That'll go on here. Let's take our combination square again. The body is against that edge. If I line that up somewhere around the middle, I can mark with a sharp pencil the outside of that one, the outside of that timber. Now, I will square that across, square this one across, so low, halfway through that timber. That's about what I need to drop it down. So on that one, that's that. I'm taking care to get these lines lined up as accurately as possible. And I know on the bottom side, that gets hashed out. So that's going to be our waist here. I haven't marked the halfway point yet. We'll get to that in a moment. So that'll go on top of there. That'll be a cross half flap. Just doing a cross cut. I'm going to take my tenon saw. Let's cut this one on the waist side of that line. I'm going to start on the far end and use my knuckle to guide that saw. Blow the dust out of the way as you're cutting through. Keeping the blade straight and plumb, straight down, with your wrist and elbow in line and ideally your shoulder, but your body out of the way. I'm going to start with a slight angle, and then I'm going to start with an angle here, and then I'm going to drop the saw horizontal onto that line. When that's cut there, I'm going to follow this line down here. I'm going to be able to see it from this point, which I don't have a point of view from. Just follow that line down. When it's over the bench hook, it's actually the saw blade is over the bench hook. not hanging out over here. When it's cut out over here, any fibres will break out on the bottom and you'll end up cutting into the bench. So ideally, you have it over the bench hook. We don't mind cutting into the bench hook, and then any fibres less likely to come out instead. Let's cut through, and we can still see the line that you want to see. So it's been cut on the waist side, which is over there, and we still have our line. So that would have been an accurate cut. I want to clean that up. So a bit of sandpaper. That'll take off those little rough edges. And if you find that your cutting isn't that straight as you're cutting through, you can use your wrist to put a little pressure on the blade. It will cut through the timber as you're cutting. You don't just stop it and twist the blade hard. You got to put a slight pressure on it as you're moving back and forth, and you can correct your cuts. You don't think you're right. When you're doing longer cuts, it's easier to do that. But we'll do those in a longer lesson with rip cuts through the grain. So we're going to use a second cross half lap just to show some of the challenges you'd face. As a total beginner, I'd expect that there's going to be things out and need correcting afterwards. Because quite often you'd see someone who's done this for years, I'll show you how to do it, that's it, and it looks great at the end of it. Hopefully mine will, might not, but we'll see. But where you really want help is how to correct the errors and the learning curves and what to do about them. So we'll do that on our second bit, and we'll label that up as well. Same colours. Right, we've got a base, and one is that one. We've got a top, and we've got this one as being 2 and 2. So marking this up, I've shown you one way to mark that up. If you're marking this one up and you're trying to hold it in your hand, that's all well and good. What I'd say about marking out is it's massively important. If you make a mistake on your marking out, guarantee 100% you're going to cut it wrong. If you get the marking out right, where you really need to focus on it, and you start doing that at these relatively simple starter joints, then going forward, you'll just keep doing it. So it's great practice to get the marking out, hugely important, right from day one, from the beginning. So we've got more marking out to do. We've got our pieces of timber. We've marked where they're going to cross over here. We want to double check it. Continually check your work as you're going through. It'll pay off to keep checking your work. So that looks like the drawing. We've got the face up and the edges in. Faces are here and the edges are in. So that should slot in right. And then the way we've marked it is this bit's going to get cut out and leave the top. So this line that's running solid here represents this line that's running solid there as well. So they look right. So that's our marking out almost complete. Next thing we want is a combination marking gauge. This is where we're going to work out the halfway point. Now, I'm going to have to do it twice because both of these timbers are 2 different sizes. We'll take one and pop it in the vise. Going to be able to see this on that one. I put this in a particular way in the vise. Here's our face side, our reference. That is going to stay on the out here, because I'm right-handed. So I want it there. As long as it's consistently on the same point out here. We're going to take our combination marking gauge and find the halfway point on that timber. It's measured. How deep is that timber? Oh, it's 32. Yeah, 32, half of that, 16. We can drop that down to 16. Do your math. If I wanted to get a rough measurement on this one, I'll show you 2 ways. This will go in here, and I'll take that mark, loosen this, run that to my 16 there. That's it. Double check. We're on 16 at that point. Fraction out. That'll be good enough. Once we're solid there, that's okay. Take your timber. Face out. The block must go against the face. When we're marking this up, I'm going to put a small dent near that end line. So when I run into that dent, it'll stop. Now, starting this, the focus is not the pin. The focus is that the block here is against the face. So even if I don't actually have the pin on it and I want to run that through there, I want to do that so that there's no gap forming here. Once you can put that pressure on there and keep doing that, that's the primary aim. Then we will take the pin and very lightly run that down along there. It's not even scratching it at the moment. I'm exaggerating this because we're just starting out. Then the pin will follow there. Because if you focus on the pin will follow the grain. But it's not. It's a parallel line to this edge. So it must follow this block. The block has to have no gap in there. Pencil line. So we can see what we're doing. At this stage, this gets tipped this way so that the face is still against the block. Push this on here and run that down. We hit there. We're good. That's one side done. Next side, the top side. Face out. You can do a mark down there. A little stop in there. Run that down. I gotta get my head over it. Run that down. We've got a parallel line to that face side. Tip that over. Drag the pin. The pin drags. You can't push it up. Drag that down. Okay. I'm really stepping through this as a basic joint because it's fundamental to all the other ones. You can mark one out, this fundamental, the rest are a breeze. Let's do our other timber as well. Another way to find the middle of the timber is to adjust it, to guess where roughly is that center. Well, if we had a guess, it's approximately there. When I push that in, there's a tiny mark in there. I don't know if you'll be able to get in and see that. But that's in there. To check it, if I flip over, I can see that there's a dent in that one as well. Actually, it's still a bit. Here's my face. If I run this, I put a dent in that side. It's got a big obvious dent in it. Little light. Let's do it up here. Is this any better? If I have my block against my face and I put a dent in there, I want to check it's halfway. Turn your timber, come at it from the other side and see if that hits in there. That is not bang on halfway. I'm not going to sweat it because it's pretty close as long as I'm continually drawing a parallel line from the face to that point on all the timbers. They'll all match up. But if I do tap it out, if I try that again, you can get halfway there, halfway there. Does that match? It's going insane. So that's another way to do it without measuring it. Let's mark this one up. Here's our face. Run it through. You can play rewind. Face out here against the block. Okay, double check your measurements before you're going to start cutting. Working drawing, red goes on the bottom, that's our base. That one goes on top. We've got the lines coming across here. We've marked out our waist. Hopefully we'll cut it correctly now. Double, triple, quadruple check. Let's cut the base first. I don't need a bench hook anymore because I'm not going to cut all the way through the timber. So we're going to use the vise and we're going to level this up that our baseline is along here along the bench. And that's quite secure. Get our saw in our waist side. We're going to cut on the waist side of that line. Keeping the saw horizontal along here, the blade, the teeth should be right as well. So we're quite close to that line now. I'm going to cut both shoulders first. So having cut down along both of those shoulders, we're going to then cut a lot of lines in here. Every 2 to 3 mil. we're going to cut down here. It's handy to have a couple of bits of scrap to make use of them. So in the vise, I'm going to put 2 pieces of scrap in here. Then I'm going to put this on the line here. So when I cut, I won't be cutting into my bench or into the vise. I'm going to be cutting all the way down to the line. Now, I'm doing this because this is helpful for the beginners that are starting out, because you want to get as close to that line as you possibly can. And you might as well use as many jigs, tools, tricks as you can. So when I'm cutting down here, I know if I fit that line or I fit those timbers, that's when you got to stop. Pretty close to that. After you've done it multiple times, you'll be picking that up without the extra bits of timber in there. This might seem like a long process doing this. It is. It's actually faster when we come to the chiseling. It's very tempting to cut out 3 cuts and make it one big lump. But when you do that, you're more likely to split the timbers on the end. If you want to get an accurate piece, it takes a little while to do more cuts, but it's actually then makes the chiseling far easier. I find this really satisfying. I like doing this. When that's done and that's cut out at that stage, you get your chisel, pop it in the last one. They just break out nicely. Because I've fixed this on my line, I can leave it in there and I can start chiseling that out now. Now when I'm chiseling it out, I'm going to work with the flat of that chisel against this timber. I can peel out a little of that. I'm only going to go 2/3 of the way across, because if I go too far, I could end up splitting the back of that timber. So I'll work my way 2/3 this way, turn the timber 2/3 back. Well, you can see in here, the fibers start to break up. So I'm going to take my chisel, hold it by the neck, firm grip on that, use the back of that chisel, and I'm going to tilt that blade at a slight angle and cut down into those fibers. And then angle that way and cut across into the fibers. When we see it from this side, we're going to go down here and it's tilted. I'm going to drag across this way and then I'm going to drag across there. And that cuts those fibers in there. So when I break into it, they should easily cut out. But again, you want to have control over your chisel, not that it kicks all the way out. There's the fibers coming up. Let's cut them. Sharp chisel down. Let's turn that one round. We're pretty close onto that line. That's lifting up there. This is where I want my chisel to cut into those. And that makes that come out nice and easy. Get a little closer to my line there. One part of it done. At this stage, let's check that this will actually slot in. That's going to be, if anything, a tight fit. And ideally, it doesn't fit. So we can make this a little bigger afterwards. So it's not too big. It's not shaking around. So good. Let's sort that out in a moment. Let's go through the other one. Let's pop that one in there. That's satisfying. Nice. So on this one, when I've put so many cuts into it as well, I'm not using a mallet. I purposely did this, trying to avoid using the mallet. It gives you better, as you're learning, your control over the chisel, and still practicing that. And the saw cuts into that is really warms you up. Now, that's in there. There's no need to hold this out here. People love forcing that. You force that and goes in there, it's absolutely awful. The vise is going to hold that. Both hands behind the chisel. Right in those corners is when you get your pieces in together and they wedge very hard and they're almost going. You might have cut the majority of this down nice and flat, but then not cleaned out here in the corners. So before you go put your pieces together, clean out those corners right in there to get any excess fibers out. So we can see our line and we're going to be fairly close to it. Let's see if these match up. That's a bit tight, which is good. Now, that's perfect. I wanted to show you this. So when I've got it lined up like this, we take a sharp pencil and we're going to watch and see, have we cut on the waist side of our line? Yes, and yes. So when we have that over, we're going to look at what point is it a little out. So we can make this bigger. So our join timber isn't hitting right. It's a little small, which is good. Too small, we can cut a little more off. If it was too big, can't really glue it in so easy. So that's just what we want. Now to fix that up, we could force it in, but we're not going to force it in. We're going to take a little more off of this one. We're going to see which one needs to come out most. We're going to go with the left one. We're going to secure that in the vise. We're going to put scrap timber with a nice square edge up pretty close to that line. Get more clamps, pop that on there. Now, if you have a very sharp chisel, you could pare that down and cut down there. If I cut that, that is a fraction too big. Using this square edge of that timber, you can hold the back of the blade against there and clean that down. And if it's sharp enough, that will cut through there. So we should be able to see on this one, very little that's going to come out of that. If your chisel isn't sharp enough, or if it's too big, what you do is you take your saw against that edge, pop it on there, and you're going to run that down with a saw blade. And you'll be able to cut that down. So that's a couple of options. And that's how you correct that error. We'll do this. This one is actually sharp enough. So I say error, I meant challenge. That highlights the importance of having a nice, sharp chisel. That now slots in there. The other one slot in. Don't worry, that one fits. Clamp those together. That's a very tight fit. So let's check this against our drawing. We've got a top here. There's our solid lines going through, and we've got the base on it. So we followed the drawing. It's very tight on one, and there's a slight gap on the other one. So that gap there is a little too big. And if we take a really close look at that, we'll see I cut a fraction beyond the waistline. So this is what happens when we have cut beyond the waistline. So you want to cut within the waistline, and this one was cut too far in, but that's how you can actually correct it. And then we've got a very tight gap. Now, they're also not flush here. For this demonstration, that's good, because what we're going to do is take a little more off of those timbers and be able to get them closer. If you've taken too much off and you're too keen, it'll be flush the wrong way, it'll be too small, which you can't really add back to it. So at least we can take a little more off now. So we're going to look at these and see which one of these needs to get closer to the line, how much more I need to clean that out. So we can see our line here. We can go down a little further on that one. And that's it. You keep working your way down. On our edge sides, we're going to check to see if that's square. We're pretty okay there. If it's not square, we'll try and adjust it. You'd be able to bend it out. And then you'd look at your lines to see why it's not and how accurate you can get it. You can also see we're not exactly flush here, so we can take a little bit more out. And that's ideal. That's what you want to do. So at this stage, you want to gradually build your way down. This is a really iconic joint. There's a huge amount of varieties of these, but where we start out is in the Dovetail Half Lap. And if you've been following through on the tutorials, this is your next step. Now, it's going to be a step-by-step video for absolute beginners. So I'm going to show you the process and the steps we're going to do for repeating this work on a lot of them. Tools required: pencil, sharpener, eraser, my markers and pens, combination square. Not a lot of complicated tools for this. I've kept it fairly simple. Combination square, combination marking gauge, sliding bevel, tape measure, but I've measured everything out already, and a jig. When we get to this, we'll mark up for our sliding bevel on this one. A chisel, now particularly a bevel edge chisel. And our tenon saw, our bench vise, dustpan and brush. That comes at the end. So let's get that out of the way. And let's make a bit of space and let's get cutting. For this one, we're going for understanding and just getting the joint done. At the moment, it's not absolute perfection. I'm expecting that you may never have done this before. And if that's the case, you'll just practice a few of them till you're happy with them before you get on to more complicated ones. So it's the understanding first. Let's get a marker. Check out our working drawing. Here's a bit of scrap, a couple of pieces of scrap timber. 44 by 22, it's pretty close. These aren't actually 100% flush, but that's okay, because when we go to mark it out, we're going to have the faces end up being flush by the very end. So that'll be fine. Let's lay them out there. That's that and that's that one. So I'm going to do that as my face. I'm going to call it the pin. I'm using different color timbers because it's easier to follow. This is going to go through there. I'm going to make that one the tail, IL. Easier to label it up, because when you're doing more timbers, you'll want to have them marked. So do it now, or get into the habit of doing it. Now, the tail is going to be up top, so it's going to be on the top of it like that. So let me turn that over. So from there, I'm going to leave a small overhang, because that could be cleaned off afterwards. And if you ever, I've seen this before where students think, I'll put the timber up like that and I'll make a nice mark straight across there. I wouldn't do that, because if you try and cut on that line, this always ends up slightly short. You're better off to leave a little extra timber and cut it or plane it off afterwards. So leave a little extra, put a mark on it, just a mark, not a straight line with that timber. It's not square. We've got that mark. And at this stage, let's find our face and edge markings. Okay, that's my edge. So I'll put that on there and let's mark this one up. Run that through. See my line over there. Run that one across that way. Remember to always keep the body against the face or the edge. If it's not on a face or an edge, it's not going to be properly marked up. That one's done. This one will go across here. Now on this one, I do want to mark the outsides of my timbers. Mark that and that. So on this one, we just mark the outside of that timber. A little there, a little mark there, and we'll square that one round as well. There's that. Now, when we're marking this one round, we only want to do very light lines because it doesn't need a heavy drawing line on it.
because these are going to get erased afterwards or planed off. So try and keep them light. It helps to have a sharp pencil. Excellent. Right. So we're through on that one. Next step that I want to look at is I can do the half, like we did with the half lap joint. So we'll take our combination marking gauge, pop it in here, and we'll mark up the half. So not a lot different to doing a half lap joint at this stage. That runs down through there. We'll run our pencil line through that in a moment. And we're able to see it on here. Because these two timbers are different kinds of timber and they've been cut differently, one is, well, there's not much in it, but it is a little different. One is 20 mil and the other is 19 and a half. And when I put them together, it's hard to see on the camera, but when I put them together on the table, that's a fraction higher. But when they're actually finished, when we finish this, both the faces will be flush because we're going to mark them with the combination marking gauge parallel off the face side. When I'm doing this one, I only want a light line going through edge to edge. So let's run that one down there. Flip it this way. Keep my face out here. Bring that up. Down there, you. It's going through there. It's not a joint that you want to rush, even if it is your first cut that you're doing on this one. I want to take your time at it. Double check that. I did that off the right side, and I've done that off the correct side as well. I keep going back to my drawing. Now that I've marked up my half lap, I can get rid of that one. The next one to do is when we look, let's look at our working drawing. When we look at this, because we're letting the dovetail overhang, and I've drawn it here purposely with the blue and the red line, but it's the red one that's going to be staying on top. This bit is going to get cut off, and this timber might get planed along here. So we don't really know what the end of that is going to be like. And because of that, we don't need to measure that. But what is going to stay consistent, and especially if there's multiple joints, is this area here. And that's why we want to mark that the same. This area here, dot, 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 that around. These going to be the same on this joint or both sides and all the way around. And we're going to measure that. And I'm going to show you how we're going to measure it. We're going to use the combination square for that. And on this one, we're going to make it 8 millimeters. So let's get our combination square, put it on 8 mil. Then we're going to take our dovetail, our tail, pop it in the vise. I'll do this a couple of ways so that you can see it. Because when you're looking from this direction, here's the line, 8 mil in. There's my mark. Over on this side, that's going to be my 8 mil in. So that we can see it from the top. Put it on there and mark that in 8 mil. It's like marking it in 8 mil here. That's going to be across there, another the 8 mil. The reason I've set my combination square up like that was if I had lots of joints to do, it's set and you just got to mark them. I wouldn't have to measure every single one because it's set on that and it's done for me. These are important points. We're going to come back to those in just a moment. Let's set up our sliding bevel. I've made my jig for my angles and we're going to do this at a ratio of, did I say that? The tail is going to be a 1:7. So that's our dovetail. It's going to be a 1:7. What the heck am I talking about 1:7? Let's get our sliding bevel. And here, the block of this is one edge. I'm going to put that against this edge. And then the blade, when that comes out, that's going to go against my line. And there we have it. Tighten that up. Now that line across here and across here is on a ratio of 1:7. And that's what we want. Because we're going to be doing, well, if you were doing multiple joints, now this is set up and it'll be the same for all of them. Have your tail there. Put your pencil on your mark. That was the 8 mil. Put the edge, the sliding bevel against your timber. Slide that up till it hits your pencil line. When it does, you draw your line. Let's do this in a marker where we're going to see it a little easier for you. Up there. That's your dovetail. Take your sliding bevel over to the other side. I want to do it with my pencil first and run that up there. Let's do that one. 1:8. Sorry, 1:8 mil in, but 1:7 ratio. Am I on my point there? Yes, I am there. Let's do on that one. That's going to be my waist. Up there, across there. Mark that. Mark that one across there. Mark that one across. I'm going to cut off the back of that one. Yep, that'll go right there. We've marked up our dovetail. We're not finished because we want to keep the top one. and the bottom's going to go. So we mark out the waste side at this stage as well. The waste side is what's going to get removed. Remember to do it now rather than later. You might forget about it or mix it up. And that little bit is going to get cut out as well. And you'll just be left with a dovetail. Let's move on to cutting this. We've marked up our timber and we're going to cut our tail. Cutting the tail is going to be a similar process, the 4 steps to what we did in the half lap earlier. However, it's just a little more awkward because it's at an angle and we've got to move about a little. So with that, I'm taking the combination square. Let's drop that down so as it's fully square. So I'm leaving that in here and I'm going to tap that over so that the line is plumb what I'm cutting. Tighten that up. Even though the timber's moved, the line's plumb. That's what we want to do. Take our saw and we're going to do 4 steps for this cut. And we're going to do all the rip cuts down before we do any cross cutting because we're going to be able to see our lines that way much easier. So on this one, we're going to cut the top of that one. So I've cut across the top. That's step 1. Step 2, I am now going to put a kerf on this side near me. So with that, I actually want to get down here and follow that line. Because my vise is in the way a little, I'm going to have to bring that over here to the edge of that vise. And I'll still be able to keep that line plumb. That's quite plumb for me. That's good. My saw can fit in here. And on that, I'm going to run a kerf line down here. Good. Since I'm on this side, let's do that one. Try and keep your fingers above the blade. That will catch in there. Now, this is the second step of this one. Tighten that up. So that's 1 across the top, 2 for the kerf. Turn it round. That one we want that way. Down this side for this kerf. Out there on this vise. Get that kerf line down. Plumb that one up. And run that down here. That was step 3. Across the top, kerf down here, kerf down here. Now at that stage, put it somewhere secure. This one's going to go in the middle. That's plumb. Step 4, cut down through here. So as I'm cutting down through here, I shouldn't have to keep checking this side. The blade should follow that kerf line. Don't want to put a lot of pressure on this. I just want to do the cut nice and easy because I don't want this small piece of this wedge getting flicked out. Doing the kerf lines both sides and being able to follow it down will mean that the edge of that tail is going to be much more likely to be square. If you don't do those steps, you will find that the tail, this edge, may not be square, and that will give you trouble when you're marking out. So that's why we do it. So I've cut down the sides for the dovetail. Next, I'm going to leave it there. I'm not cutting those out. Now I'm going to cut the half lap. Again, our 4 steps. Waist side of that line. Tilt it 45 or just over. Then both lines. We can see both lines. We're going to cut down that kerf there. That's gone a bit out. Flip my timber. Step 3. That's good. And step 4. Let's cut that out. Tighten you up. We have all our cuts, all our rip cuts are done down and purposely done so that we can see our lines. It's going to be far easier now to start doing our cross cuts and getting rid of timber. And the dovetail will reveal itself. Try and keep on the waist side of that line. Now that I've cut the back off, I'm going to do my little wedges. This side doesn't really matter. whether you've cut the little angles off first or you cut the back off first. But because I've done that and I've got my shoulder along here, this little bit in here, that shoulder line, I'm going to use the blade against that shoulder line and start cutting this little bit here out. I'm going to put it this time this way against my shoulder there. Start cutting that one out. I can go. We have what looks like a dovetail. It needs cleaning up with a chisel, so we're going to do that in a moment. So let's clean that up with a chisel. I've got quite a wide chisel here. That's a 26mm bevel edge chisel. And as I'm doing it, I'm going to be checking as much of this is square as possible. So here's our edge, combination square. I'm going to put it on here and check that the back of that, the shoulder line here is square. So I'll put that up to it. I'm happy that that's square. Off the face, we can check these little edges. That's looking square. And the same with that one. Good. So they're okay. What else is very important is off of this face here, that this line is square. So when we put this body against that face, that goes there. We want to check that that's square. So can we get a real close up on that one? So the body of this is going on that face. It's on here. And that's going to go along and see if we're square on this line. We want to be as square as we can on that line, a 90-degree across there. Let's tidy it up a little. Where you want to tidy this up as much as possible is right down in here and in this corner. Because when they go together, these are often the bits that get in the way. Chisel by the neck, cut that there. Blow the fibers out of the way instead of trying to put your fingers in there. Don't put your fingers in there and try and pull them out of the way. That's where people end up getting cut. Stay safe. Rip that across, right down in there. That's satisfying. Just to get that little corner out. Clean those up. I'm not really cleaning that up. Hopefully you've cut this pretty okay. When you've got your dovetail cleaned up and you're happy with that, now we're going to take our pin. So it's going to go like this. We did our lines where it's going to go around, and I'm going to use the vise again with this and our combination square. So I'm going to take combination square and run that down so that's square. This stage, get your pencil, put your combination square or your tri-square up against the edge of your pin timber. Take your, if you wanted to do it on that side, you could do it on that edge and then on this edge here. So both our edges, and we're going to put the tail up to the pin. Instead of trying to hope that our shoulder line is square, we're going to make it square with the combination square or a tri square. Put it up to our lines there. When we have it up there, at this stage, this is where we're then going to outline the tail onto the pin. That's what we're going to cut out. Now we need to square those lines across there a little. So it's not a fast joint. That's why I was saying it could be a costly joint. And I think it's nice to be able to do this by hand. If you want to do a piece of work that's going to stay a long time, or at least the basis of a dovetail joint, it's a good looking joint and it demonstrates some nice craftsmanship, and it's nice to be able to keep craftsmanship going. But to be able to do it by hand gets you to manipulate the wood a little better, and it's quite good. We're going to mark up our waist on here, and be careful when you're marking up your waist on this one that you remember which it is. So check your drawing again. You've got the faces up, this one's staying, so that means the top of this is going to get cut out. When it's on there, let's get it in the vise. Hold it securely, hold your timber securely. I'm looking at that, I'm checking it, I know which line I want to go to, and let's cut this down. This is very similar to what we did for the cross half lap. We're going to use the same principle as what we did earlier on the cross half lap, and putting multiple cuts into that timber and then taking it out with just a chisel. I'm going to cut the shoulders first on both sides, and I'll show you why. I'll cut this one down. The reason I cut my shoulders down is because then I can put my timber up against it and check at that point. Can I see the outline where the tail is going to fit in? This one's a little out at this stage. So if I was to keep cutting, I will end up having a little trouble there. So I'm checking it now. That's my line out there. I want to come a fraction out on this one. So I'm going to take the blade and take a little more now before it gets a bit more difficult later. Just make that a little wider now. Let's check that one again. That's out there. That's going to fit more snugly. It's going to go down. So every 2 to 3 mil, we're going to put a load of relief cuts in here, and then we're just going to take it out with the chisel. So this is a fair bit of cutting. So I've done this myself before. I thought if I put 3 cuts in here and I knock it out with a chisel, that'll be okay. But more often than not, what happens is it breaks out the timber on the other side, and then you're starting over again, and that just takes even longer. So I find stick with it. Lots of relief cuts, less likely for any damage, and it tends to be generally quicker and more accurate. It's also less wasteful because you don't have to start over again or run that risk. The other thing is I just find it so rewarding and satisfying to crunch these out. So at this stage, we'll take our chisel and go 2/3 of the way across. We don't want to go the whole way over. We don't want to bust out the other side. When we do 2/3 on this side and we're ready for it, we'll turn the timber around and come at it from this direction. Now, I'm only going to do this with chisels, and I'm not using a mallet. And what you could do is you could have a router plane to clean this out. I don't have a router plane, can't justify the cost of it, not doing it that often, when you can do it like this. So for beginners, you don't need expensive tools all the time. It works just well with this. If you're doing a lot of it, then it's worth the investment. Now, when you're cutting this out, if the saw hasn't gone down far enough, you will have to take the chisel by the neck and cut down along this shoulder line and cut those fibers in there so that they cut nicely, and then that you're able to peel out the timber on the end. You may need to turn it a few times. At this stage, I'm going to check that timber now, and I'll take the combination square off of this edge. I put it down in here and see, are we getting our timber inside fairly square? If we are, that's good. Then this is an indicator of this is the time to see if we can offer this one up to it. So let's offer that up. And that's going in there, and that's worked in there nice and snug. So we have that there. Now we look very closely at that. It's not flush, and that's okay, because that's where we're going to then work our way down and take a little more out of here. And you'll be able to take a little more out of that one. I'm going to carry on doing that now and try and get that a little closer. You would also check it for square. So if we run that in there, we've got that square there as well. If it's not square, you can adjust it slightly and work out where it's out. Maybe the shoulders need a little more cutting. So I can see on this one, because of my marker lines, you need to cut that one over a little bit more. And the kind of joint, the gap that you're going for here is minimal gap. But what would be allowed, a tolerance, about 1 mil, 2 mil, and the edge of a combination square is 2 mil. So for my students, if I'm able to take a combination square and if I can fit it in there, it's 2 mil gap. It's just a little bit much. It's just continually practicing and trying to improve upon that. If that doesn't fit in there, well then you've got a pretty all right joint. Certainly for your first joint, I'll be pretty pleased with that if it's definitely less than 2 mil. That's what you're aiming for. Ever wondered how to join 2 pieces of timber together at an angle? This video, I'm going to show you how to do that like a pro. These are great basic starting out joint. It's called a raked halving joint. Now, a raked halving joint They are ideal for custom furniture, for putting on roofs and joining up lots of different roof timbers as well as custom timber. It's a super joint to be able to do, and we're going to start out with the most basic of them, which is going to be a half lap joint. This one will be like our drawing here. We're going to have this piece of timber on this side and this one coming down here. Now, a raked halving joint is any angle that is not 90 degrees. So that can be any, that gives us a lot of variety. When we're marking this one out, we're going to go with a decent angle to start out on. And that's going to be a 45-degree angle in here. So let's look at what tools we need. We don't need a whole lot of tools with this one. We've got our tenon saw. Definitely need the combination marking square. We need the combination marking tool. We definitely need a sliding bevel, steel tape measure. A tri-square would be helpful. A chisel, definitely pens and pencils. This is what we're aiming to do. And this is typically what you'd get, a drawing like this with minimal measurements on it. And it looks straightforward. I didn't want to complicate the drawing, so I left it fairly straightforward like that. Let's take our working drawing more in the frame here so we can get a good look at this. I've purposely drawn this with very little markings out on it. This is typical of what you would get in a drawing. Very few measurements, if any, on it when you're starting out. It looks straightforward enough like that. Here's our timber and we want it like that. I strongly suggest to you that you sketch this out. Sketch it out first on a piece of paper so that you get to understand it in your head and you're able to visualize it and picture it. And we'll see what we're doing. On your drawing, if you redraw it or mark out on it, that's why I've drawn two here. We're going to put in some labeling and we're going to put in some marking out. So we're really going to have to step this out bit by bit to mark it out correctly. So our first thing that we're going to put on these two pieces of timber, actually on the timbers, will be our face side. That's our face side, so we know where it's pointing to, so our edge is going to be down there. We've got a face on that one, and a face and edge on this one. Let's call this one our pin, or the socket. I stepped through this because it is important to label all this. Skipping this stage of the marking out will lead to problems later. At the moment, as you're learning this, you'll be doing one joint, only one. Later on, we're going to have multiple joints, but we're building up to doing multiple joints by having set up our tools as guides, and then we can measure less. So once we measure on certain things, we'll use our guides to mark out multiples of these. Face side and face edge. This one is to come down 140 mil from that. We take that one and we put it on 140 mil. That's good enough. We've got our mark there, and on that mark I would actually write, I'll do it so you can see it above. I'm going to write that that's 140 mil. It's not great to see that, but I can see it there. Because if you're not sure where your markings are and you have a number of pencil marks on it, you lose track. So we know we're going to go to that point there. This is the one we're concerned with, and we want this one to go across here. With that, we're going to take our combination square and use on the body of it the 45 angle here and the ruler. This is a tricky one, and if you haven't got used to this, now is a good one to master it. Let's hold the edge of this body along the edge of our timber here. It's going to run up tight to that edge. This timber is going to cross it here. So we're going to drag that down. This is our 45 line here, and we want to put that one up over it. I'm going to take a pencil and I'll go over the pencil marks afterwards. When that's on there, I'm going to move this up here and have a slight overhang. Got a small overhang on that one. Have to hold that down and put a mark on that timber. I am not going to put a line across there. Don't put a line across. Just put a mark on where that's going. That's going there. Hold that down firmly. Take your ruler out of the way and put a mark on this one. I'm going to have to look over this. I'm going to try and get it in the camera that where these two pieces of timber join up, if I lift this up, when I lift this one up, I'm holding it in my hand in here. I'm holding that there and they keep slipping about and moving around. If this is fixed on the bench, it's easier to do it, but I need to show you for the video. This area here, where they meet, this is where you want to mark that and that on both pieces. If we've got that mark on both pieces, let's put a little arrow to that one and a small arrow to that one. Can that be seen? That's what we want to do. But it's far easier if you're able to hold it down on the bench and use some clamps. When we have that marked up there, we'll then take each piece individually and mark it with our combination square. This one, it's a straight line along the top. So make sure that this body is definitely against that edge. That's against the edge now. And we can mark a line in here. That is actually too far out on that one. There it is. Yes, that's a good thick line that we can see. With this is going to get cut down this direction. The top half is actually going to come out. Now, we don't want to mark it all out. We only want to mark a little of it out. So off the face, we want to run this one across here. And we don't want it all the way down. It's only going to come halfway out. So don't need to run it all the way across. Let's put that one aside for now. I've only marked the top that's straight. We're not doing this. We're going to have a lot of work to do in here. That went across there, and there's our mark. It's tiny. Continually looking at this one, we have to imagine there's a dotted line coming back here underneath. So I need a little direction to say it's coming through that way, so we know which way it's coming. Now we take and mark this one across here. I'll need to line that up. I have to get my head in the way to see what I'm doing. That's the waist side of my line. Right through there. Keeping track? Okay. The bottom part of this joint is going to get cut away. Let's start marking that out. Lovely wood. Right the way down to there. Let's start marking that. That bit is going to go. At this stage, don't go running away to try and cut the half lap yet. So that's going to go. What we need to do is work out this angle. So where our timber meets down here, we need to turn our timber over. And the distance, if we measured along this edge line, here's our edge line. If we measure along this edge line at a perpendicular 90 degrees up here, we would measure 15 millimeters. Take this and measure it at 15 mil, like that. That's my edge, there's our 15. Where that crosses over, that's the mark we're looking for. We're going to mark it on both sides. When I've set that, I want to keep it. That's why this is handy. I have to keep checking which is the edge side. This is why it's important to have these marked as the face and edge as well. So if that's my inside edge, then I need to mark it up along here. My 45 is going that direction. That's going to get cut out along here. We'll see this afterwards. Down here and across there. We've marked in our 15 this way. We need to do 15 here in from the edge. Here's my edge side, and that line, I'm taking that 90 degrees up there, and where it crosses this one, I want to mark across there. I know it's in pencil, I hope you can see that. How far across this goes, because we have it like that now, across here is going to be from that line, the width of that timber. We put a little mark at the width of that timber, and then we're going to use our square again and start measuring this one out. I move this down now, and we have to keep that in place there. I'm not going the whole way because we're not cutting all of this out just yet. I want that one. Square it down. I've got to square it off of the face, and then that's going that direction. Taking it to that line, hold it tight. Try and do this on the table, on the bench. I'm just trying to get the camera to see it, because now it tells us that this space here at this end, instead of having it just run out wherever it is, we've got to do it at 2 mil. Take your combination square to 2 mil. There we go. Where that now comes across and intersects on that one, we have a point here and a point here from our 15. The same on the other side. So it'll be like that. We're leaving this out for the moment. We're going to cut the tail or the plug first, but we haven't finished marking it out yet. We're going to take our sliding bevel. We're going to hold it to, if I can get that on there, that'll be doing well. I want to take that out. We see that there? So that the block of the sliding bevel is against our edge here, and the blade is going to come through and intersect our 2 points, our 15mm point and our 2mm point. Let's tighten that up. That will run through there. I will mark it on the waist side along here. This is going to get cut out. If we turn this over, now that we have this set up once, it's a guide. We're going to use it on the other side. And if you're doing multiples of these, you're going to run them on the maul. That's a fraction out, but we're going to go with the guide. Let's just see that that actually lines up. So very close, we follow our line. It's gone through our 2mm point. It's going out to the end. It's coming straight across here, and it's caught our one here, and it's running through there as well. What's important is this 15mm point. The reason this, well, they're both important, but the more important one is the 15mm point, because if there were multiples of these, this is what you would see. It's like the base of the dovetail. This is the bit you're going to see. If that runs out somewhere off the timber, it may get planed off and cleaned up later, and you may not see it. So now that we have just this angle marked out, we are still not ready to cut. We need this in our vise, and we need to take care with our marking gauge where we're going to mark it up. I'm going to take this on this side with my face out here, because I'm right-handed. Put it in the vise. When I'm looking at that from top, I can see it's on the right here. I'll take my marking gauge. I'm going to go down to my line here. Mark that in there. Go down to that line. Tighten that up. Doesn't move on me. Get your pencil mark in there, and we'll line that up. If we've got a sharper marker, you can run that along there. This one, down the end, that's okay. And this time, down to full half. We've got so many lines on this now, it becomes difficult to focus on what's staying and what's going. So it's worth labeling the lines if you need to label the lines. This is where measure twice, cut once comes in. With this one, measure 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Try to cut once. Run that along there, across there, and through there. So we're marking out our waist. The back half of that is all going to go. We'll cut down our half, but we'll also cut into here. The first cut we're going to do on this one is going to be this angle cut in here. When we put this in the vise, we're going to line it up so that our line there is going to be plumb. Pull that out there a little down there. We're not cutting out this whole piece. We're just going to cut down this line. And we're going to use the same principle as we used before by making curved lines down on the waist side of that line. This is a bit of a tricky one to get started in here because we're running down along the timber here. So I'll get down here at an angle. I have to move around, and I'm going to start cutting very carefully on the waist side of that line. Put it a little over there on my vise. My handle's in the way. Check that this is plumb. There. I'm taking my time at cutting this. I'm trying to get the line as accurate as I can. So that's why it's plumb, and I just want to get a curved line down the side here. I've double checked my marking out, so I'm pretty confident that's it. So now, take your time at cutting it, try and get it as accurate as you can.
So hopefully you'll be able to cut the ones. Once I've done one side of this, I'm going to turn it over and come down the other side. I'm still able to see my line here, and I've cut on the waist side of that line, a kerf down here and a kerf on the other side. And we've got this edge here. Now, that was step 1, step 2. Normally we would cut across the side, but it was so difficult. We're going to now cut into these and the blade will follow that kerf line. If you find that you're doing a very long angled cut in here, and you've started with the tenon saw, remember to jump on to the panel saw. With so many markings out on this cut, you want to take your time at it and remember where to stop. Quite often I see my students have cut all the way through and they've cut further down the line they're meant to cut. So really take your time at it and watch out for it. If I look closely at this one, it didn't follow the curve. It came down on this side. So whilst I still have it together, I'm checking my work as I go along. Now I'm going to try and correct this before I move on. So I'm going to put it back in the vise. And I'm going to push the saw over to be able to take that out now before me having to chisel this out later. I've managed to pull that over a small bit. And I'm okay to be able to chisel the rest of that one out. At this stage, when I've done this line, I'm going to leave this one because I want to be able to see when I'm doing my half cut, I want to see my full line. But before I do the half cut, what often happens is people cut straight down and go way too far on one side. So I'm actually going to do the cross cut on this one. So that's our second cut. With the cross cut on this one, we don't need a bench hook. It's not safe. Put it in a vise. Once it's in the vise there, we need to move round and start cutting through here. Here's a tip for you. If you're struggling to do a 45-degree cut, get yourself a scrap piece of timber, a quick clamp, and line that timber up to your line. If you have the stuff there, why not make use of it? If that's in place, now you have the timber as a guide and you'll be able to cut through that one if you're struggling to do a 45-degree cut. So we've cut down our shoulder line. We're going to cut down the cheek now. And it's far easier to see the cut line than a pencil line. So that's why I left it till now. I'm going to start it with the tenon saw. I'm going to cut on the waist side of that line. Make sure that's tight. Let me get back to here. And start as I've done all the other joints, the half lap and everything else. Start on the top. Tilt that more than 45 because I want to get a long kerf line down here. So with my cuts 1, 2, 3, we're going to be able to cut right down. I'm going to be cutting this one with the high side near me because I'll hit that first. I'll be able to watch that one. When I've hit that one, then I'll be able to go over to the other side, or when I've nearly hit it. So when I'm going to be cutting down
on the long side now, I want to take care that I don't end up cutting into this line. So I've kept this fairly horizontal across here. And I need to watch the blade that it's horizontal, that I don't cut into that. It's slightly lower on that side. When I'm getting down to the end of this cut now, I'm going to slow down an awful lot. I'm going to really take my time at it because I'm probably going to cut into this here and it's probably going to come out. But I don't want to go beyond it. You can see it's a bit further on that side. So we have one bit out. This is going to come out quite soon. We've got quite a bit of fibre in here that we want to take out. We're going to do that in a moment. Going slow at it, we've managed to get quite close to that line and leaving the line there, so we've cut on the waist side. At this stage, we can cut the rest of this little notch out. Again, we're going to put it so that the line is plump from the front. That line will be plump. Tighten that up. I'm going to catch the blade on that shoulder. Use that shoulder as my guide. Now that it's in the vise, I'm going to take my chisel and start to clean this up a little. Hold it safely, both hands behind the blade. Let's just notch that little bit out. When we have that out, we can take our combination square and check our angles to see if these bits are cut square. If we've got great big lumps in it, you take a pencil and you try and find the high bits and highlight the high bits and slowly chisel them out. You can take the combination square and see if that angle is a clean cut. And we want to try and get it as clean as you can down along there. How are we doing on our drawing? When we've got this bit out, we're then able to put it to our drawing, our working drawing, and check we're doing okay. Looks all right. I've got a bit out here, but this will come out later. Take the socket piece, and this is going to line up across here. Like you did before with the dovetail, when this on the back of it has no gaps and it's in there correctly, here's our edge, here's the body, there's our 45-degree line. When that's in there at a 45-degree line on that, without a gap on the back, it's looking good. So go to your line. You can just see your line here. Now we're going to put a line on this side. I'm referring back to the dovetail joint because a lot of this is what we did with the dovetail joint. You would have cut this one first and then use this to mark out the socket. So if there's a mistake on here, you're going to go over that line. That's our waist side in there, and it's halfway down. So we can mark these out. That line is half. The same on this side. Half there. That just catches that one. So we're going to check our working drawing. We've got our face and edge, and continually coming back to this. If we want to check our measurements on here, put your square, combination square onto 15 and see, have we come in there at 15? Pretty close on that one. I'm not going to measure the two because this could get cut off there somewhere. This is a complicated joint to do. We're keeping it fairly simple at this stage because we're doing it at a 45-degree angle. This point being a 45-degree angle, we're doing it there because it's a common number, it's a common angle, and it's the next easy step to do it. If you were doing this on a roof and it wasn't a 45 and it was something like a 32-degree angle, you'd want to have a second sliding bevel. And at that, what you want to do is label both of them. So you put some masking tape around it on the handle and you mark it and write one is 32 degrees and the other is for your angle cut there. You want to identify which is which. You do not want to end up cutting these out multiple times. So now that we have plug or the tail sorted out, we've outlined the cut on the socket or the pin. We now have to mark down the halfway mark. That's no more difficult than what we've been doing before. Taking a marking gauge and we're going to run that down here. So we've got it. The only thing with this, certainly if you started out, is to remember to do it from the face side. There's our face and the block is against the face. That way the distance is going to, or the top of it, the face, when it all comes together, it should be flush. And when I mean flush, they'll marry up. Get a pencil line through that pin mark, or the mark you've done. It's easier to see it. You've done that one through there. Oh, gone off. You can rub that out. That's why we have our razors. So, lots of cuts in here. On the waist side of that line, I've double checked that. I've triple checked it. Another tip for this, if you're cutting at an awkward angle, is start out a little higher on the corner. See the level of the blade, it's up higher. Instead of me trying to get the whole bottom of the blade along that timber there, instead of me trying to get the whole bottom of the blade on the timber, I'm starting on a corner. I'm going to get a bit of a kerf line going first. I'm going to slowly drag that down so as it follows my line. I haven't cut all the way down yet. I've just started that kerf line. At that stage, I want to check that this is going to fit in there. So I'm going to put this over, and if I can see my cuts either side of that or very close to it, then we should be able to get this pretty neatly in there. If I'm a bit far out, we've got to correct it. And to correct it, we would either cut further in than we need to, or a little further out. I've cut down both my shoulder lines. Measure twice, cut once. Let's double check that. I can see the outside of that. That is going to be a tight fitting joint. If we need to plane that a little, we can do, or chisel it down. So now, every couple of mil, we're going to take a lot of cuts out. Another tip with this, when I've cut my outside lines, because I can't see the line across here that's away from me, and I can see this one, when this goes in here, you're not going to see any dents in here if you cut off the line. So I'm better off to be looking at my finish line. So I'm going to cut this one on this side so I can see here, and if it goes a little over on that side, that's okay. It'll get hidden. So lots of relief cuts in there. Take our chisel, elbow on the bench, let's prise these open. Listen, I like this. That's very satisfying. Those little cuts. Great. I'm going to use the back of the chisel because I'm pretty close down on this one and try and pare out down to my line. I'm going to go 2/3 of the way in. Only 2/3 because I don't want to break this bit out at the back. So I'm going to turn the timber around in a moment and use a wider chisel for this. That's a good wide chisel, 38mm. When you're right in the corner here, these fibres, I take the blade, put the back against the shoulder here and score that, cut that into that. So the fibres are cutting in there, a slight angle. So right in those corners, this should come out a little easier. That's why you gotta control it. You don't want it skipping out the other side and busting that edge after you've taken so long to cut it. Now, if you have the luxury of a router plane, it's a specialist plane that will fit in here and you'll be able to clean that out. Make use of it. I don't have one, so I'm just cleaning it down, taking my time at it with a chisel. Let's test it out. Remember, faces up, edges in. See if it fits. It's a little tight. Now we're going to see what bits need to come out to make that a closer fit. When it's this tight on here, I'm going to take a little off of this one. If you needed to take any of the others, you could do. What's good to do is to check, are your 45s correct? If they are, leave them. Don't go cutting your 45s. So that's okay. So that's straight edge at the back. I'm happy with that. I'm happy with this straight edge along here as well. I will take a little off of this shoulder and I'll take a little out of this. So let's do that with the chisel. What I've done is I've taken my tri-square against there and I can see I'm a little high here on this side. I'll take a little off of that. You can almost see the blade on it from the saw there as well. Nice little curl. So it's fitting in there nicely. We've got minimum gap here and across here. We turn it over, very slight gap there. And when we look into our corners, very little gap as well. It's not perfectly flush, so I'll keep working away to get this down in here. I can see my line is out there, but it would also be helpful to take a little off of that. So I'll do that before we meet again. And here we have our raked halving joint. I'm happy with that. Get it a little closer. Oh, this bit that's coming out here, we'll mark that up now. Trying to mark that up is a tricky one. So a couple of ways to mark this. I've got my line here and that's going to come all the way through there. I can take that out, find that line there. I'm going to make it bigger because at this stage I don't want to cut it in here and have it short. It's got to be a little bit longer. So from that point of view, let's do it this way. I've purposely left it an overhang because later on we'll be able to plane that off with a plane and get it exactly where we want it. So there we have our raked half joint. That is something we would use an awful lot in roofs or custom furniture. So if you've done that one, the next challenge will be do two. We're going to have them married up in a bracket and that's going to be out shortly. So we'll have an additional one on that one. And you're going to be then, the next step will to be joining up 3 pieces of timber. That's going to be fun. So I'm tidying up and just trying to put the stuff away. I find woodworking, the process to clean up is to sweep from the dirt off the desk straight into the bin. Whatever's left on the ground as you've been working, sweep that up, get the big bits out of the way, dustpan and brush, and finally hoover. And when all that's done and all the tools are away, then happy days. And all good. Fun. Okay, have a great one. If you liked it, look forward to seeing you again. See you in the next one. Thanks, bye.